All right. Hello, everyone. If you don't know me, I'm Robert Jenks. I'm the AnimeFest janitor.
And apparently trainer as well.
Well, only when I'm suckered into it.
Personal trainer?
Only if I get those kind of hourly rates.
I'll pay you twice what you're getting paid now.
No. Double zero is still zero. All right. So one, I know that many of you have been managers for us for a long time. We have a lot also that are new. What I try to do is organize this such that the stuff that would be applicable to everyone, including those that might have been managers since the 90s, of which there are some in the room, would still be very applicable to. And put the content at the end that would be things that it's old hat to some of you, and you could go ahead and leave early. It's fine. But you know, as the organization has gotten larger and things get obviously more complex, I thought it was pretty important that we started to go through some of the things that kind of are important and needed to make sure that we all understand what kind of is expected, not just from a legal perspective, which is important because there's obviously legal risk in what we do, but in addition, just kind of what we expect and want to do and how we want to act as a company and an organization. So, okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about, and stop me at any time if you have questions. You don't need to wait for the end. We're going to talk a little bit about culture of the organization. We'll talk about how you're expected to escalate issues. We can answer questions and talk a little bit about that too. Policies around non-discrimination, accommodation for disabilities, safety and the applicability of OSHA, emergency procedures, handling harassment complaints, and then the final section, which is kind of optional in terms of if it applies to you directly, if you already know how to do it, all those things, is we'll go into the website and start going through procedures on how to accept and reject volunteers, how to create schedules, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, so we spent actually some time last night talking about this particular topic of trying to describe what it is we sort of think of as AnimeFest culture, the convention itself, what makes AnimeFest different, how do we want people to describe us, how do we want volunteers versus staff versus the members to describe us. And this is, I took a lot of advice from the CCL, from a couple of the board members, and trying to boil this down into what I felt kind of represented who we are and what we want to be and what we want you guys to take to heart that we are and to convey that down. You know, culture within an organization like this starts from the top, and if we don't, at the top, believe in these things and do these things, which we do, then it can't come down in terms of it can't be conveyed down through the organization. And so I'm hoping that this kind of sums this up as best we can. And I've said this, and I was just reminded by Jonathan that I've said this many times, is that I've often described AnimeFest as being a way that we can take and pool money from a bunch of like-minded fans, put it all together, and do something that none of us could afford to, could logistically do by ourselves, right? And so that's kind of the fundamental of the organization is pulling that off. It's almost like, you know, which of us could go and get a Japanese guest by ourselves, bring them in, pay for them to be at our house and do things? Well, I couldn't. Even Jonathan, probably not. We need the resources of each other to be able to make that happen and to do things that we, as an anime fan watching a show, would say, oh, that'd be great if we could do that. And that's how we started. And that's how we continue. And we really want to be able to distinguish ourselves from other events that are out there. We are different. We want to be different. And so these are the things that I'm hoping I can convey to you guys that and really resonate. It's just not just me up here saying lip service on this, right? Nobody's paying me to say this. This is what I want you guys to feel this organization really represents. Because it is what I feel it represents, right? We really want to distinguish ourselves by being organized and prepared, right? Planning. Getting things done such that when the event happens, things go smoothly because we were organized and prepared for it to happen. That we are courteous, friendly, and helpful to our fellow fans. Not just volunteers, but staff as well, or our members as well, right? Everyone. That we are not going to be commercially motivated, right? This isn't about money. We are not trying to invent new things to do at the convention to fleece our members' pockets, right? We've always had the philosophy that if we didn't need to charge something more for something else, we don't do it, right? In our minds, it's better if we're pooling, even if we're only satisfying the desires of 10% of our members. Our philosophy is we'd rather spread the cost of that across 100% of our members than trying to dig it into those 10% to make that happen, right? And hopefully, we're meeting enough desires across our whole population of members that the fact that we're using everybody's money for some all evens out in the end. Okay, we're not trying to figure out how to add some event that will give us another $5 per person, or what have you. In many cases, like for example, I'll give you an example here. We used to charge participation fees to like $2, $3, $4 to participate in workshops because there was a cost associated with the workshops in order to provide supplies, paints, things like that. At a certain point in time, we were like, no, this doesn't feel right. Let's just soak up the cost. Yeah, it meant that the 40 people in that room got an extra benefit that the other 9,000 didn't get. But in the grand scheme of things, that money and that maybe feeling of nickel and diming people wasn't worth it. It wasn't who we were, right? And so we want to continue that trend. It's not about inventing new ways to make money. And then encouraging and learning from feedback, right? So it's very easy in our positions to get especially negative feedback and to take it personally. Please don't. Take it and learn from it. Step back and realize they're not complaining about you, even if they used you by name. They are not. They are complaining about the convention. Step back. Think about that. Think about whether or not they actually have a rational dispute with this. Think about if there's ways that we could have done things better to avoid that situation. Yeah, they might be sensational in their complaint and have blown things completely out of proportion. Absolutely. But there may be something in there that we should have done differently, and we need to learn from that and do differently because we did that. Okay? And I've said, what's our goal? Our goal is to be the best anime convention. The reality of it is I've come to the realization trying to make this slide that was a stupid statement. That of course every convention out there is trying to say that, and the problem is that best is so subjective and personal. And I'm not saying that this statement here at the bottom of the slide isn't subjective and personal, but it's that way in a different manner, right? That the reality of it is what I really mean by best is that it's not about numbers, like how many people are at the convention, or about making money, or the number of guests on our roster, or what have you. It's about a large percentage, as close as we can to all of our members, walking away saying AnimeFest is my favorite anime con. That, to me, is the sense of satisfaction of we've done the right things, right? Because to me, if we're following the first thing, that we truly are just pooling the money from everyone in order to do something that all of us want to do, but couldn't afford to do ourselves, then I can't imagine how we couldn't achieve the bottom statement. Okay? All right. Questions? Tomatoes? I can done. All right. So here's a couple of things that I wanted to point out that I think that I've seen happen, heard complaints about, and different things that to me are counter to the culture that I just described on the last slide. And that is the answer of I don't know and leaving it at that, and the answer of that's not my job. And to me, while both of those things could be completely true statements from whoever said them on staff, to me, those by themselves at least are really bad things. They are not helpful, they're borderline rude, and they don't help us to achieve our goals. So please, don't use those by themselves. It's fine if you don't know the answer. We don't expect you to know everything about the organization. However, I do hope and expect that you guys will know, if it's not your job or you don't know, that you probably do know who knows the answer, whose job it is, and if you don't on those, who you could escalate to that will. Okay? So please, don't answer questions this way. And it comes up recently when we're talking about the I don't know, it's like Infodesk or something. Like, it's really bad if Infodesk, you ask a question there and I don't know. If it's a valid question about the convention, it's kind of Infodesk's job to know. Don't leave it there, right? That's true of any of us, though, in any department. Please, don't say, I don't know, and leave it at that. I don't know, but I bet you that such and such department knows, and they're based here. Go. Right? Do you need instructions on how to get there? Fine, I'll help you. Or there's a staff member that's not doing anything. Well, hey, can you help this person bring them to ops and figure out the answer to this question? Or help Infodesk to know the right answer to that question. Yes, Henry?
So working in a previous many years of customer service role, I mean, another way to also address that is instead of using I don't know or that's not my job, that's a great question. Let me see if I can find someone, that may be able to help, or that's a great question. Would you mind giving me a couple moments? So that's another way that people, all of us, could try to use that verbiage is instead of using the negative connotations of I don't know or that's not my job. That's great. Let me see what I can do to help you.
Yep.
So something positive.
Absolutely. I mean, and would you really expect that if you went to the front desk of the hotel and you ask a question about the hotel rooms or the services of the hotel that either of those would come up in their answer? No. They're in the hospitality industry, but let me tell you, we are too. Right? And so we really can't. And I get that we are all volunteers, that at the convention, things can get super stressful, but we've got to, if we want to achieve that statement of AnimeFest is my favorite anime con, and I hope that's also a true statement for staff members, then we've got to get past these problems. Okay? All right. And it's always funny when I see somebody answer the question, I don't know, and they've got a radio. I'm like, really? Okay. All right. Escalation. I did this quickly. Hopefully I didn't mess anything up. So one of the things, and CCL, you guys can beat me up if you don't like this. We talked a little bit about feedback and things to the convention, and my gut reaction is for members, maybe we should create like a feedback at AnimeFest.org or something along those lines. But I'm almost thinking, why wouldn't we want them to send it to AF 2016 at AnimeFest.org? Simply because that goes to it goes to all of you anyway. I don't think there's a reason to filter those down. So I don't know, but anyway, my suggestion is that we potentially publicize that address as being a place to send feedback. We could also make an alias of feedback@animefest.org that goes to that same list. And we can move that alias year to year to point to the right year's ConCom. So anyway, that's my suggestion there. That was a little bit on the fly, but anyway. So the progression here, I hope, is obvious to most of you in terms of escalating up the chain. In terms of staff escalating to supervisors, supervisors escalating to managers, directors, CCL, and board. So some of you, especially if you're new or confused by the organizational changes, might not know the email addresses, though. So, by the way, this presentation is in the AnimeFest guide folder in Drive, which you all should have access to. If you don't, let me know after, and we'll make sure. But I think it's shared with all at animefest.org, but we'll see. Okay. Questions? So, some of this is legal, some of it is not. Not that it's illegal, not just that it's not required by law.
Extra legal?
Extra legal, yeah. Yeah!
I think that is the actual term.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, it just sounds funny. Anyway. So, it is my feeling very strongly that one of the reasons that in general people like anime conventions is because of this thing that happened naturally, and it wasn't necessarily a conscious thing on the part of anime conventions, but this sort of culture of inclusiveness within the conventions. And I think that as conventions have gotten bigger, maintaining that has become a little harder to do. I think this went without saying for a really long time, but it can't go without saying now. And that is that, again, some of these are the legally protected classes of individuals that you cannot discriminate against. And so this applies to a couple different things here. One, this applies when picking volunteers. And I need you all to understand that picking volunteers is equivalent to hiring from a legal standpoint. So if you decide to pick one volunteer over another, not based on prior experience in terms of their capabilities or what they've said they can do or whatever, but instead because one is a male instead of a female or a female instead of a male or what have you, that's illegal discrimination against any or most of these qualifications, okay? Now, there are a few on here that are not, again, illegal, but they are what we want in terms of the organization and our own standards, okay? Does anyone have, so one thing to note, you have access as managers to information on this list when reviewing your members, your volunteers. Please make sure you keep in mind that these aspects that don't base any of your judgment on this. Okay? Okay. So then we get to disabilities and people with disabilities. And I wanted to, there's so much information here, and there's no way I could cover all of this adequately in this training session. So I tried to capture the important bits. So we'll go into sort of two phases on this. One is dealing with it from a staff and volunteer perspective, and the other is dealing with it for members. So back on the prior slide, disabilities, people with disabilities is on that list. We can't discriminate against that. But it goes much further than that in terms of we have a responsibility, both legally and more importantly ethically, to accommodate those with disabilities, both on staff and as members. We don't have an obligation to give them preference because they have a disability, right? You shouldn't necessarily pick someone for a role in your department because they are disabled. You should pick them, that would also be discrimination. You should pick them based on the qualifications of what you need for those jobs, okay? And we are not required to lower our quality standards or lower the job in order to meet those needs. But I'll tell you, we have lots and lots of jobs in the organization, okay? If you run into a situation where you are concerned, you are not discriminating against someone, but you are worried that by declining that person from it, that it might be construed as discrimination, please work with operations and potentially recommend for another department or such, or put a note in, okay? So it's one of those things where there may be cases, maybe someone applies for a position, they have a disability that might impact the work. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out if there's a job they could do where that disability would not be in the way. Let's see if we can modify that job in some way that it would work for them. Okay? Yeah.
Really curious. So sometimes I randomly select volunteers. Like it's just like, hey, give me my vote. Like, so I'm curious about the ramifications of that. Then, like in the sense of if someone, because I'm not always reading necessarily like all what they put as like why they want the department.
Technically speaking, unless you did that for all of your candidates, doing that for partial could lead to discrimination.
Okay.
Right? Because you potentially have picked people who are less qualified than people who are.
Yeah, because I mean, the people that are my regulars I tend to choose, but I mean, if they're not my regular, it's just kind of like.
Well, but here's the thing:
whatever.
if you don't, so the other aspect of it, I've run into this a lot when looking through the lists of applicants. Obviously, if you have past volunteers who we know we've had good experiences with, they're wonderful people to work with, then absolutely select them. When you get to the unknowns, the first timers, people that you haven't had before, if you don't have enough criteria to be able to judge whether or not they are, one, I would encourage you to contact people and start asking questions. It's also a good way to find out, are they going to be responsive to email? Which to me is a big criteria for picking a volunteer for anything I'm involved with. Except when I don't respond to emails, but that's a different story. Fire me. You want my job, take it. But I think that selecting, yeah, you have to take my job though. So, but
Because I'm trying not to fill. I guess my thing is I'm trying not to fill up all my slots because some of my people wait until a little bit later.
Yeah.
Before they put in their application. So. Only thing I'm looking at, okay, so what times are these people saying that they're going to be at the convention?
Yep.
If they're not there the times that I need them, I'm automatically
Sure.
defining them to another department. But the ones that are there for those times, I'm just kind of like, like, it's truthfully, I mean, it's eeny, meeny, miny, moe.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
not
I understand.
thinking about it.
I think that's okay.
Okay.
I don't think that's if you're not selecting someone because of one of these criteria, it's not.
Okay.
I would say I would encourage you to try to find some other actual
Method.
other method
Sure.
that is more discerning in terms of what you actually need, but I think that's okay.
It's been okay for someone.
So hypothetical here.
Yeah.
I say I
use
have.
one person to say you took that guy instead of me because, and then if you don't have any way to say, well, I emailed you and you never responded, or something like that, then
it can be an issue, and I mean we've never had a challenge, but at the same time, there's nothing stopping it from being challenged in the future. I think that we just need to make sure that we are on the right side of ethics in those cases. That's really all I'm saying.
Like, I don't think about any of the other stuff anyways, but it is just.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much answered.
Okay. All right. volunteering is kind of weird, right? It's not employment, it's not job, but it's also not a job, right? So it follows a gray area, and I'm not sure how much there's been a challenge or not. But again, I care about the law, but the conformance to the law to me is secondary to the ethics of the situation. That's all.
Care about the law.
Yeah. Okay.
Hate
And these are just examples I copy-pasted from, I believe, the ADA site of ways in which we could potentially modify the job. I think, again, I can't imagine too many disabilities for which we could not find some place, some job, some function that they could do, or that we couldn't potentially modify jobs to make it work for them. So if you run into those situations, escalate up, and you don't know what to do, just escalate up. We'll figure out what to do. So this is a weird one too. So Title III of the ADA law covers places of public accommodation. They don't cover private clubs or churches. There is an argument to say that the functions that we have for which we require them to be a member, that we check for a badge in order to get into them, are private functions. Yes, they are in a public venue, but they are private functions. We're leasing out the space. It's ours. We don't necessarily have to comply. And that's our stance in terms of a legal perspective. But at the same time, that doesn't matter, because ethically the right thing to do is to try to accommodate as much as we can those people with disabilities. That doesn't necessarily mean that we have to substantially modify an event in order to accommodate. We just have to do what we can, okay? And that is very subjective, but again, I think the counsel that I would offer on this is that, one, first off, be careful what you ask people. There are many questions you could ask that would be considered discrimination for the fact that you asked them. Okay? And I can't give you a conclusive list of what those questions are, but it really comes down to, and we'll have another slide here that talks a little bit through an example scenario to try to help understand what I mean by that. But we have to be careful in those sense. The other is that, let's get into the next slide now. So a common situation, well, not maybe common, a situation that's come up many times, right? A member stating they need something. And that something from a completely uninformed place might be something that's like, no. A person waiting in line asking for a chair is an example of this, right? No, but hold on. Okay, so first off, ask yourself, not knowing anything more, is this a reasonable request? Okay, if it is, it's not really outside the bounds of a safety or policy or what have you, consider just doing it and not worrying about it. Okay? If it does potentially pose safety or what have you, then we need to ask the next question. Do you need this because of a disability? Okay? You cannot ask what disability. That is a very bad question to ask, and nor are details. But you can ask if the reason that they need something for them, a chair to sit in while in line, is because of a disability. If the answer to that question is yes, we need to try to see if we can accommodate that situation. We are obligated, again, both legally and ethically, to make that happen. Okay, and that's everybody's responsibility. So here's the other thing too. If you can't figure out how to accommodate that, don't end the conversation by saying no. End the conversation by saying, I don't know what to do, I need to escalate this. And put it up the chain. Because we need to make sure that we're doing the right things here, okay? There are lots of things that businesses have to do to comply to this that are incredibly inconvenient. And we're going to get there in a minute too. All right. Wait, I haven't talked about this. So this is mostly, again, copy-pasted from the site. But one of the, I guess, what they put down as the principal test about whether an accommodation is sufficient or not is, will the accommodation provide, will the accommodation provide, it's an interesting copy-paste, an opportunity for a person with a disability to achieve the same level of performance and to enjoy benefits equal to those of an average, similarly situated person without a disability. Okay? All very subjective, which means hard to comply with. It usually comes down to coming up with an accommodation agreement with the person that meets both parties' needs, and negotiating that is really what it comes down to. You won't necessarily be able to do exactly what they want, but maybe we can meet in the middle somewhere that will make things work and make it where we can meet that and keep everybody safe and not disrupt everything from happening as planned. Okay? Service animals. So, there is a tremendous amount of confusion about service animals. First and foremost, there were an awful lot of people, and there are an awful lot of people that pretend that their animal is a service animal. That does not mean that we can take the position that people do that. Because you can't know. And let me get into detail on that. So, one, the ADA defines that service animals can pretty much only include dogs. There is a slight provision for miniature horses. Escalate to me if that comes up. Just because I want to see what's going on. And miniature horses are really cute, so, you know. But someone's comfort kitty is not a service animal, or their snake, or their bird, or what have you. Unless laws change, and believe me, that excuse of I want to bring my cat because it keeps me calm has been used. And so just know that right now pretty much only dogs qualify as service animals. Things change. And we'll actually want to click on this link and we'll go into that a little bit. But a really big piece of this is, and this is a huge bit of misunderstanding, people, there's no certification of service animals. There's no paperwork they can show you to say that it's a service animal. Yes, you can go online and buy that paperwork. It is meaningless, but you can. Service animals do not have to wear little vests, cute little vests that say that they're a service animal. That is meaningless. Anyone can buy them for any animal, and real service animals have no obligation to be wearing them. Okay? So let's maybe delve into this a little bit. So I won't go through all of this. So, and actually, we'll come back. We'll go into the next slide, and then I'll come back to there because, no, there, okay. So here's the thing. If you believe someone that is there with an animal, it's because it might be a service animal, a dog. Here are the two questions you are allowed to ask. This is important. delving beyond these two questions is legally perilous. Okay? The questions are, is the dog a service animal required because of a disability? And the second question, if they say yes to the first, is what work or task has the dog been trained to perform? Do not delve into more questions. Take the answers to those two questions, and we have to make a judgment call as to whether or not that animal is a service animal or not, and act accordingly. Okay? Now, that will mean that based on the answers to those questions, people can pretend that their animal that is not a service animal is one and get away with it. Absolutely. Believe me, millions of businesses every day have to deal with this problem. And it happens. But they have to deal with it. And so do we. Okay? We have to allow it. It doesn't matter. Now, that does not mean that if there's a problem later because of that, that we can't take appropriate action. So, if it turns out that that dog starts becoming incredibly disruptive or destructive or what have you, or becoming a safety problem, we can eject them for that. And we should. Okay? Because a trained service animal is not going to be barking at things unless the barking is because they're trained to do that for a certain circumstance. They shouldn't be growling at other people. They shouldn't be doing things that your normal pet would do in those situations because they're trained not to do those things, right? They are not a pet. They're a trained working dog, okay? We do want to make sure that on this, that we err on the side of believing them, that it is a service animal. Because, again, we can't prove that it's not, and if it turns out it really is according to the ADA, we've broken the law. Okay? Yeah.
A point, I've read up on this a lot too with kids in this
Yeah.
situation. A point I noticed is you can ask the dog be removed, but not necessarily ask the person to be removed.
That's true. Yeah, that is true as well.
So you have
Yes.
to be careful.
We can
that
we can
you don't
eject
say,
the...
you gotta
Yeah.
get out of here.
Yeah.
No, the dog has to leave.
Exactly. That is true.
And the
Absolutely.
other thing, I don't know if you're aware of, Governor Perry passed a law that veterans with PTSD are allowed service. Their dogs are rated in the state of Texas as service dogs.
Yeah, and honestly, I am way more familiar with the federal laws on this than I am any state laws on
Yeah,
it.
well, I found that
don't...
by accident.
Yeah, and there very easily could be additional qualified animals, etc., that are allowed by the state of Texas, and I'm not aware. But
From what I read, it's only
yeah,
just last year he passed, or
yeah.
his last term he passed that for
Right.
PTSD. With
So again, I would very much encourage that if you're about to say no to an animal, that we have some discussions amongst staff to determine, are we confident that we should say no? Okay. One, escalate up the chain. Just escalate up the chain. And, again, if it's escalated to you and you're not comfortable, escalate higher. Okay?
I think he's more, well, I would be more asking if I had a Great Dane walking my dealer room.
Mm-hmm.
Do I then contact David as he's my director, or do I contact the safety director, or do I contact Yokai, or what?
Well, it's a good question. One, the reality of it is that I wouldn't contact anyone if the dog is not being disruptive. I would assume that it's a service animal and not take it any further and not escalate or do anything about it. Because the other aspect to this is that if all of us jump every time we see an animal as to whether or not it's a service animal or not, because there's no designated markings or any, then we also don't want to annoy the hell out of this person, because every staff member that walk by is like, oh, I know these two questions I can ask. Let me ask these real quick. I've answered this 50 times in the past 50 feet. Don't. The reality of it is that, like, and we can go back to this too, that businesses have to deal with this, and including us.
And most of what I've read, you judge more by the behavior of the
Yeah.
dog
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
Is the dog responsive to commands? Is it docile around
Correct.
the people? You know, that's more what's key. I mean, even if it's, no matter what it is, if it's, like you said, disruptive, it can be asked to be out of there.
Yeah. Now, it's also true that, again, they're working dogs, not pets. You don't want to be rushing up trying to pet the dog or to, you know, cuddle with it or whatever, because it's typically, they're not necessarily friendly either. Just because they're not friendly doesn't mean they're not
You can
doesn't mean
tell that
anything.
They're usually very attentive.
Right.
Very business-like.
Yep.
So really, we shouldn't even think about it unless it's dangerous.
Correct. Correct. Yep. So there's a bunch.
Question in the background.
Go ahead.
So if it's a dog, I mean, that's the case, but what if it's not a dog?
If it's not a dog and it's not a miniature horse,
Then it's
then-
not being disruptive.
then it's against our policy to have pets there. It would be a pet,
Well-
and unless we have some belief that there's some other hidden Texas law that I don't know about or what have you, then it's not allowed.
Because years and years ago, I was a apartment manager, and one of the other managers came across where there was a narcoleptic who had a service animal that was an iguana. And every time he'd fall asleep, the iguana would whip his tail into his face and wake up. So, I was like, yeah.
Well, the
It was
reality of
trying
it
to
is,
get
the
him
reality
to
of it is
fall
there
asleep.
really are lots of service animals of different types. The only ones that are protected by the ADA are dogs, and again, apparently in a couple of circumstances, miniature horses.
A lot of people have used cabbage and monkeys.
Yeah. So here's the other thing too. Again, it's against our rules for them to be bringing pets in. If it does actually appear that the animal really is a service animal, even if it's not a dog, comes back to that whole, if it's not being disruptive, you know, maybe we should just allow it. It's okay.
The other thing, this happened at IkiCon. There was a beautiful dog, was well behaved and everything, but somebody confronted them. Come to find out, they were in the public area, they were a hotel patron.
Yeah.
So in the
Yeah.
public areas, you gotta.
Well, we always have to be careful when trying to enforce our rules, that making sure, are they actually wearing an AnimeFest badge? Okay, because we have a lot of people that walk through that are just normal hotel guests, and just because they're in a anime T-shirt or a Marvel T-shirt or what have you, doesn't necessarily mean they're with us.
And they're curious about what we're doing.
Yep.
The state of Texas only defines canines as service animals.
Got it.
I can foresee a situation, going back to the Great Dane in the delivery room,
Uh-huh.
where the dog is not causing an issue,
Uh-huh.
but the situation of the dog being in there is causing an issue. Either because
Doesn't matter.
somebody's afraid of the dog.
Doesn't matter.
Or everybody
Someone
still
else's
doesn't
fear
pay.
of a service animal is inconsequential to ADA. Doesn't matter. So allergies don't matter. If you're allergic to a dog, you can't prevent them from being in a public space with you because you're allergic to the dog. That's your problem. By the law, that's your problem. So let's get into this too. This was kind of an interesting question. Are emotional support, therapy, comfort, or companion animals considered service animals under the ADA? No.
They're not trained.
So, well, even if they are trained, it's anyway. These terms are used to describe animals that provide comfort just by being with a person. Okay, because they have not been trained to perform a specific job or task, they do not qualify as service animals under the ADA. However, some state or local governments have laws that allow people to take emotional support animals. So that's the why you want to make sure you're asking those two questions, because what is the animal trained to do can help you determine that, right?
Well, is that right there?
Yeah.
The governor signed that for the PTSD dog.
Yeah.
I think that the only exception to that would be
In Texas.
Yeah.
At least Texas doesn't provide any, does not normally provide an exception for comfort.
Does the ADA require service animals to be professionally trained? No. They need to be trained to perform the task, but they don't have to be professionally trained. You can train your service animal yourself. Again, it comes down to there's no documentation. There's nothing you can get that proves or disproves that an animal is a service animal. I don't want to go into too much. Do animals have to wear a vest or a patch? No. Can a person bring a service animal with them as they go through a salad bar or other self-service food line? Yes. Can hotels assign designated rooms for guests with service animals out of consideration of other guests? No. Can hotels charge a cleaning fee for guests with service animals? No. Can people bring more than one service animal? Yes, if they're trained to do different things for them. Does a hospital have to? There's a lot of hospital stuff there too. Doesn't apply. Certification, no. Those don't matter. There are no particular breeds. Yes, a giant Great Dane, a Yorkie to Yorkie to a Great Dane, or a Newfoundland, or it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
So if you ask the dog what the dog has been trained to do,
Yes.
and I just want to make sure I sound this out of my head.
Yep.
If you almost get what you perceive to be snark as, well, if the dog's trained to sit and roll over and play dead, I mean, that would lean me toward a no. If the dog's
Correct.
disruptive, I mean,
It has to relate back to a disability.
because,
No,
so if
it's
they
not.
just
You
say-
cannot ask what the person's disability is. That goes back not to service animals, but the ADA. But it
Yeah.
should be pretty obvious based on what they're trained to do as to whether or not that's because of a disability. And again, if you have any concern, don't say no, escalate.
Yeah, so if they just say my dog's trained to sit, I mean, obviously I can't ask anything further, so you're kind of.
I would answer with, that does not sound like something that qualifies as a service animal.
Okay, and then hope that they
Maybe ask them
open
to
up.
allow-
And,
do
Potentially, yeah,
okay.
sure.
How does that help or something like that?
Well,
I mean, I guess I haven't seen too many dogs be disruptive enough all the time. So
yeah.
I'm thankful for that.
Again, in general, because we don't want to get in the situation, and we have this with dress code, right? We don't want to get in the situation where everyone's bombarding this person with an animal all the time. That, in general, you only want to do this if this appears like it's going to be an imminent or actual safety problem, or they're being disruptive or something along those lines. In general, I would just accept it and move on. Okay? There is more detail here, and again, the link is in the presentation. I would encourage you to go to it and read. Let's see. Okay. Safety and OSHA. So you guys know what OSHA is? Okay, how do you think OSHA applies to us?
Do a lot of lifting, bending, climbing, ladders, anything like that.
Pretty much all of it.
So, by the way, it doesn't. Now, that does not mean I want to throw OSHA out. OSHA only applies. Hold on. OSHA only applies to employees. It does not. It explicitly states it does not cover volunteers. It does not matter. Now, it matters from a safety perspective. OSHA didn't make up rules without a reason. There are reasons behind all these, and we should pay attention to that. If we're going to do something that would violate an OSHA rule that you're aware of, probably not a good idea. And you probably should escalate that up and say, should we really be doing this? Probably not. So please, while I will, say that OSHA does not legally apply to us, ethically it applies to us. So, okay? And I think that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I hope you guys all know that the safety of our volunteers and our members is critical to this organization. And we absolutely, and we absolutely do care about that. And we should not be doing things that are dangerous. We need to make sure that we're protecting everyone. Okay? Any questions on that? I'm not super familiar with OSHA rules. I was just excited to note that I could drive a forklift without training.
Only until acting as a volunteer.
But yeah, only for volunteers. Yeah, but exactly. And then I was like, "Ooh, is that a good idea anyway?" No. Okay. But here is my thinking on dealing with general just emergencies. Okay, this could be from an evacuation situation. There's always the potential of a shooting, a serious medical event, some sort of police or event or something along those lines. To me, everyone that has one of our AnimeFest radios at the time an event happens is now part of the emergency response team. I don't care what department they're in. You've got a radio. Now, if we need to redistribute those radios to people that are in a better situation to deal with that, we should do that. But at the same time, right at that moment, if you've got a radio, by the way, you're part of the emergency response team. Someone from the management team on the radio should take charge of the situation. Typically, that would probably be somebody from the safety team that would take over that responsibility. But it could be a director, it could be a CCL member, it could be a board member, I guess, if we have to take charge. They are responsible for announcing over the radio that we are in an emergency situation. Everyone should be radio silent. And then give instructions in terms of who should not be silent and who should be... doing things like taking a roster of who's where on the radio and who needs to be involved with the situation. They're also then responsible at the end for announcing that it's over. Okay? And this is really important. We obviously have a lot of chatter that goes on over the radios over the course of normal day-to-day of what happens at the con. But if we get in those situations, we absolutely have to make sure that the radios are silent so that the people that are involved with whatever situation can communicate. That could mean, and they could choose to switch channels. So another possibility, although we have to keep the repeater in mind in that, but it could be that the right solution is that the person in charge in the situation says, you, and you on the radio, I need you all to switch to this channel, we're going to deal with it on that one. Right, and keep it off there. Could be. But I didn't want to go into a lot of detail here, but we just need to make sure that. Now, here's the other thing. And I don't have a slide on this or what have you, and I've talked about this in our meetings before. Fire alarms that go off. So, I've said this many times. We have to take fire alarms seriously, but we also have to keep in mind that in a number of situations in our history, fire alarms are used as an intentional disruptor to us. Even to mask a theft. So it is imperative that we take them seriously and we start an evacuation. But at the same time, we should not be abandoning our equipment or, all those things. Again, people on the radio should be coordinating to figure out how to effectively deal with the situation, how to effectively coordinate the evacuation. And again, there are more detailed on that, and we'll send that out to everybody. That's something where the safety team will be coordinating that, and I think probably Freddie will want to review those procedures and go from there. Questions, concerns, tomatoes? Okay. I know I'm boring everyone.
I have one quick addition to that. As we get closer to the convention, there's been some talk about implementing a system to help communicate with more effectively on radios. Assuming it gets approved, I don't think there'll be any trouble to it. There'll be some cards that will be handed out to help in communication. There'll be things like codes. They're colored codes. They're very simple. I'll highlight how you can affix them to the back of your badge or your badge holder, and you can flip it up and look at it. Things like that to help everyone understand what we're saying and better communicate. because if you have to wade through the chatter to get people to be quiet, it's a problem.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
It's evolving. I really hope not.
All right, harassment. And this is more about dealing with harassment. The main thing is knowing that we want harassment reports, harassment sightings, etc., cases in which we notice or get reported harassment to be taken very seriously. Okay, this includes not just sexual harassment, but also just bullying and things that bullying, stalking, the variety of different harassment concerns that can come up at a convention. We also have to acknowledge that some non-zero percentage of those harassment claims are not true. But my opinion is that the more seriously we take those, the better it is for us in the cases in which it's real, and the better in cases which it's not real. So here are my suggestions on what should happen. 1, move discussions to a staff-only environment. Empty panel room, operations, the safety office, someplace like that where you can get out of the normal crowd and deal with it, right? But make sure that the environment is one in which the reporter, member, staff member, etc., feels comfortable, right? That may mean getting people of same gender involved. That may mean just getting a few other people involved, so it's not just a purely one-on-one conversation or something along those lines.
Communicate with whoever is reporting why you're doing this
Right.
as well, and they take it a whole lot better.
Yep. It is a huge piece. Take notes. Whether it's on your phone or a piece of paper or what have you, take notes. Believe me, nothing will convince the person you're talking to more that you're taking it seriously than taking notes. Especially take down times, dates, places, etc., any descriptive information that they're giving you. Take notes. All right? If the report includes any illegal activity, please involve our off-duty officers. Discuss it with them and determine if on-duty police officers should be pulled in and involved. Okay? So we need to take this seriously, get the right people involved, take the details, escalate. Okay? Questions?
Yes. Move discussions to a staff-only environment. I think I'm understanding that.
Okay.
But it's mentioning like to get the same gender staff member.
If the
And so-
situation warrants it.
Correct, but I think my question with the verbiage is staff from the way of our hierarchy of things, meaning it really probably shouldn't be staff, but a manager level
It's a wording problem.
Okay.
Probably it does mean manager, director,
above.
etc. Yeah.
Okay.
I tend to use staff as all-encompassing
I know.
in some cases, and using it as being non-management in other cases. I'm very inconsistent.
I usually
Sorry.
no, it's okay. I usually tell my volunteers that they need to bring those situations to myself and then
Which
handle that accordingly, because
That's
I just
fair.
want to make sure that this isn't saying that they can also now handle the situations.
no,
or...
probably not. No.
Okay.
I mean, if they're the only ones available to do it, I'd still rather that these things happen.
Sure.
But at the same time, no, I agree. These things need to be escalated up. But you also want to be sensitive to the situation, right?
Sure. No.
If you've got a rape accusation or something along those lines, then we don't want to bring 50 people into the room,
Treat it like SVU.
and make this person feel incredibly uncomfortable, right? So
Yeah.
we have to take those situations into account and get the right people involved in the right levels. So yeah, I would agree. I guess I didn't go into that detail because I figured everybody in here, I think,
figured
can understand
everybody
that.
knew, but
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
more understanding.
Yep.
Okay.
Agreed. I still, quite honestly, haven't figured out how we're supposed to deal with harassment complaints that come before we've even started the convention. We get emails from people who say, I'm coming to the convention that's happening in 3 months, and I've just found out this other person is coming to the convention, and I think I'm going to be threatened by them. anyway, we have to deal with them on a case by case basis, but it's a lot more troublesome.